My daughter and her husband organized my retirement party. My son-in-law had been planning to destroy me for 3 years. He almost got away with it. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not a man who cries easily. I spent 41 years building a hardware supply business from a single storefront in Dayton, Ohio, into a company with 4 locations and 63 employees. I worked through 2 recessions, a fire that gutted our warehouse in 2007, and a cancer diagnosis that my wife and I handled quietly, without telling a soul. Until I was clear, I am not a man who falls apart. I fell apart the night of my retirement party. I turned 64 in March. By April, my wife had convinced me it was time. She was right. My knees hurt every morning. I had grandchildren I barely knew because I was always at the office. My wife, Carol, had been patient with me for 4 decades, and I owed her more years than I had given her. So I agreed. I would hand the business to the management team I had built, retain a small ownership stake, and step back. We would travel. We would breathe. My daughter Claire organized everything. She is 36. Smart. And capable, in a way that still surprises me sometimes. Even though I raised her, she called caterers. She decorated the community room at the Marriott in downtown Dayton. She arranged for old colleagues and friends to fly in from 3 states. She did it all with her husband Derek, handling logistics beside her. The way he always handled everything beside her. Always helpful. Always present. Always smiling that easy smile of his. Derek came into our lives 8 years ago. Claire brought him home for Thanksgiving. And by Christmas, he was already the kind of man who offers to fix things before you ask. He helped me replace the gutters. He drove my wife to her sister's funeral when I had a supplier emergency. I couldn't leave. When Claire told us they were getting married, I shook his hand and told him I was glad to have him. I meant it completely. He joined the business 4 years ago. My idea. Carol had reservations, she mentioned once, and then let go. Because that is who my wife is. She says what she thinks. And then she respects your decision. I brought Derek in as operations director because I trusted him the way you trust someone who has sat at your dinner table for years. Someone who has watched you grieve and celebrated with you and knows how you take your coffee. I trusted him the way you trust family. The night of the party, the community room was full. 60, maybe 70 people. There were photographs on a display board that Carol had put together me at 23 behind the original counter. Me and my first 2 employees. Me and Carol at the ribbon, cutting for our second location. Someone had found a picture of me with hair. People laughed. There was a slideshow. There were speeches. My warehouse manager of 22 years, a man named Thomas, who has hands like sledgehammers, and the gentlest voice you've ever heard, stood up and made half the room cry talking about the day I told him he could take as much time as he needed when his son was sick. I was standing near the bar when Carol appeared beside me. She had been across the room a moment before. I felt her hand close around my wrist before I saw her face. Her grip was tight. "Walk with me," she said. Quiet. Steady. The way she used to talk to Claire when Claire was little and had done something that needed to be discussed away from other people. "Carol, I'm in the middle of walk with me right now," she said. "Smile while you do it." I smiled. I do not know how convincing it looked. We walked to the back of the room, past the catering table, through a door that led to a narrow hallway with a service exit at the end. The noise from the party dropped behind us like a curtain. Carol held up Derek's laptop, the one he always carried in that slim black case he set down on the gift table when he arrived. She had it open. He left it at the gift table. It was open. I wasn't snooping. I was moving things to make room, and I glanced down. She looked at me. "I need you to read this." "Carol?" "That's Derek's read it." I read it. The email chain was long. The most recent message was from 3 days earlier. The address on the other end belonged to a man named Garrett Sollins. an attorney in Columbus I had never heard of. The subject line was Final Transfer Timeline. I read it twice because I did not understand it the first time. Then I understood it. And I wished I did not. Over the course of what appeared to be 18 months of correspondence, Derek had been working with this attorney to establish what the emails called succession positioning. That phrase sounds bureaucratic. Let me tell you what it meant in plain language. Derek had identified that my retirement created a natural moment of vulnerability in the ownership structure of my company. With my reduced day-to-day role, with Carol's name absent from the operational agreements, with my trust in him deeply embedded in every decision I made about the business, he had been quietly, methodically repositioning himself to acquire controlling interest. Not through a buyout, not through any conversation with me, through a series of document amendments that had been filed, apparently with my signature. Over the past year and a half, I did not remember signing those documents. There were also emails about my life insurance policy. Derek had asked Garrett Sollins about the process for being added as a secondary beneficiary on a policy where the primary beneficiary was a spouse. He had asked what circumstances might affect the order of distribution. He had asked how long the contestation window was after a policyholder's death. My wife was watching my face while I read. When I finished, I handed the laptop back to her. I stood in that hallway for a moment, and I listened to the sound of my retirement party through the door. I could hear someone laughing. I thought I recognized Thomas's laugh. "How long have you been looking at this?" I said. 15 minutes. "I've been looking for you for 15 minutes. Does he know you have it?" "No. He's at the bar." I thought about walking back through that door. I thought about crossing the room and asking Derek to step outside with me. I am 64 years old, and I spent 41 years solving problems directly, and I have never in my life wanted to confront someone the way I wanted to confront him right then. Carol put her hand flat on my chest. "Not tonight," she said. "We don't have everything yet. If you go at him tonight, he'll have time to cover it. You know that." She was right. She is almost always right. And in 40 years, I have not always been smart enough to listen. But I listened that night. We went back into the party. We smiled. I shook hands and accepted toasts and gave a speech that I had written 3 weeks earlier about gratitude and legacy, and the people who build something alongside you. Derek stood at the back of the room while I spoke, and he raised his glass with everyone else. I looked at him while I talked about loyalty. I kept my voice even. That was the hardest thing I have ever done. We went home at 10:30. Carol had taken photographs of every screen of that email chain before she closed the laptop and put it back. In 40 years of marriage, I have learned that my wife's instincts move faster than mine, and that her instincts are almost never wrong. I do not know where she gets it. I only know that I would not still have a business, or a marriage, or quite possibly my life, if I had not listened to her that night. We sat at the kitchen table until after 2 in the morning. I called Frank Bellamy, who has been my attorney for 22 years and who answered the phone on the 3rd ring without complaint. I explained what we had. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Don't touch anything at the office tomorrow. Don't say a word to Derek. I'm calling someone in the morning." The someone Frank called was a forensic accountant named Helen Marsh. She came in 2 days later under the cover of a routine audit review. What she found in the following 2 weeks reoriented my understanding of the previous 4 years completely. Derek had amended 3 operational agreements using what appeared to be my signature. 2 of the amendments had been filed during periods when I was traveling, once when Carol and I were in Florida visiting her sister. Once, during a supplier conference in Chicago. The 3rd had been filed on a day I had taken off for a medical appointment, which meant I was unreachable by normal channels for several hours. Helen told me that the amendments, if allowed to stand, would have given Derek effective controlling authority over day-to-day operations within 18 months of my retirement. Not ownership, technically, but control. And control, as anyone who has run a business knows, is the thing that matters. The signature analysis came back 10 days later from a documents examiner Frank hired independently. 2 of the 3 signatures were not mine. I have stared at a lot of things in my life that I did not want to believe. I stared at that report for a long time. Derek did not know what was happening. He came into the office every day. He sent me texts about the transition process. He called Claire on the phone in the evenings, and I could hear his voice from the other room when I was sitting in the kitchen. And I would think about those emails, about the timeline he had been building quietly while he sat at my dinner table. And I would feel something I do not have a clean word for. Not rage. Something colder. Claire did not know. I am certain of that now. And I was nearly certain of it then. My daughter is not a woman who lies well. She never was, even as a child. If she had known what her husband was doing, something would have shown. Carol watched her carefully during that period. The way Carol watches everything. And Carol told me she saw nothing in Claire that looked like deception. Only the ordinary happiness of a woman who believed her family was intact. That was the part that required the most careful handling. Frank brought in a detective not to build the case, which was mostly built but to establish a complete timeline and to determine whether Derek had any additional actions planned that we were not aware of. What the detective found was that Derek had a second phone. The second phone had communications with Garrett Solins that went further than the emails Carol had found. There were discussions about contesting Carol's rights to the business interest in the event of my death. There were discussions about Claire's inheritance position and how it would be structured to flow through Derek rather than directly to her. He had not just been positioning himself to take my company. He had been positioning himself so that if anything happened to me, everything went through him first. I have built things my whole life. I know the difference between a structure someone builds to last and a structure someone builds to extract value from. What Derek had constructed, layer by patient layer, over 4 years, was not a plan for partnership. It was a plan for extraction. He was going to take what I had spent 41 years building, and he was going to do it using the trust I had handed him freely, the access I had given him gladly, and the love my daughter had for both of us. Frank filed with the county prosecutor's office on a Thursday morning. The charges included forgery, escrow, and breach of fiduciary duty. The Columbus attorney, Garrett Solins, was referred to the state bar. Derek was at our office when the investigators arrived. I was not there. Frank advised me to stay away. And for once in my life, I followed legal advice without argument. Carol and I were at the house. We sat in the kitchen. It was a Tuesday, a little before noon, and the sun was coming through the window the way it does in Ohio in early summer. That particular flat gold light. Carol made coffee and we sat across from each other and neither of us said much. My phone rang at 1217. It was Frank. When I hung up, Carol looked at me. "It's done," I said. Claire called me that evening. She had been told by that point. The call lasted a long time. She cried in a way that I have not heard her cry since she was very young. And I sat in my chair in the living room and I let her, because there was nothing I could do for it except be there. She asked me why I had not told her sooner. I told her that I needed to be certain before I said anything that could not be unsaid, and that I needed to protect her from carrying the weight of it while we were still building the case. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I should have seen it." I told her that the people closest to us are the last ones we see clearly. I believe that is true. I lived inside that truth for 4 years. The legal process took 14 months. Derek entered a plea. He received 3 years of probation, mandatory restitution, and a permanent bar from any ownership or management role in a business where he holds a fiduciary position. The document amendments were voided. The business interests were restored. Garrett Solins lost his license. Derek and Claire divorced 8 months after his arrest. That part I cannot pretend was clean or simple. My daughter lost her marriage and her idea of her life in the same year. She has been rebuilding. She is living 20 minutes from us now. She comes for dinner on Sundays. Her daughter, my granddaughter, Lily, who is 4 years old and has Carol's eyes, has started asking me to read to her, which is something I am making time for now, in a way I would not have made time for a year ago. I think about the version of this where Carol did not pick up that laptop. where she moved it without looking down, where Derek's timeline completed itself the way he designed it, and I found out too late, or never found out at all. And my life's work passed through a structure built by someone I called family into hands that were never going to hold it the way it deserved to be held. I think about the things I missed. The times Derek redirected conversations about the business documents, the times he handled things personally that could have gone through our administrative team, the times I thought that he was being efficient, that he was earning his place, that I was lucky to have someone I trusted so completely in the position that needed the most trust. The warning signs that I now recognize as warning signs only because I know what they were pointing toward. I do not say this to blame myself. I say it because I want to be honest about what trust can cost you when you give it, without keeping one eye open. I raised my daughter to believe in family. I believed in family. I still believe in family. But I understand something now that I did not fully understand. Before, trust is not something you award once and then stop watching. It is something you maintain. With attention. The way you maintain a building or a business or a marriage with regular inspection. With honest eyes. With the willingness to see what is in front of you, even when what is in front of you is something you would give anything not to see. My wife knew before I did. She told me once, years ago, that she watches people's patterns, not their words. Derek's words were always right. His patterns, she told me later, had small inconsistencies she had noticed and filed away. Nothing alarming on its own. Nothing she could bring to me with certainty. Just small things that had accumulated into a discomfort she could not name until she looked down at that laptop screen. I am a man who built things. I understand now that the most important thing I have ever built is not the business. It is this: a marriage where my wife will grip my wrist and say, "Walk with me," and I will walk. Where I will listen when she says, "Not tonight." Where 40 years of paying attention to each other has made us into something that can withstand what should have been unsurvivable. The retirement party photographs are framed in our hallway. There is a good one of Carol and me near the end of the evening. We are both laughing. I remember what we had learned 2 hours before that photograph was taken. I look at our faces in it and I see two people who had decided, without discussing it, to hold on to the night anyway, to take the good of it, even with the weight of what we were carrying, to laugh when something was funny, even in the middle of a catastrophe. That is something I am proud of, that we could still do that. We went to Portugal in September. Carol had wanted to go for 15 years. We spent 3 weeks walking through old cities, eating well, coming back to the hotel late, sleeping without alarms. My knees still hurt in the mornings. I did not care. I am not the same man I was the night of that party. I do not mean that dramatically. I simply mean that I see things differently now. I look at the people around me not with suspicion. I am not a suspicious man, but with more clarity, with less of the comfortable blurring that comes from loving someone and letting that love stand in for attention. I built 63 people's livelihoods. I raised a daughter who is going to be all right. I have been married to the same woman for 40 years, and she still surprises me. Still moves faster than I do. I still knows when to hold my wrist and when to let go. Derek took nothing from me. He tried. Carefully. Patiently. For 3 years. He nearly managed it. Nearly is the whole story. If you are sitting somewhere right now with a feeling you cannot name about someone you trust, a small thing, a pattern that is slightly off, a question you keep, not asking because you don't want to be wrong. I want you to ask the question. I know how much you don't want to. I know how much easier it is to let the comfortable version of things continue. I let it continue for 4 years. Ask the question. Look at what is in front of you. Your people deserve the real version of your attention. And so do you.